Good morning and welcome, Sunflowers, to Good Journeys Tarot. Today is our weekly broadcast of 78 cards in 78 weeks, in which I walk through my study and creation of a tarot card on this journey of tarot exploration. I'm so glad to have people who are following along with this project with me. We are well into it, almost halfway there now. And we did skip last week because I was on vacation. I will be talking more about my vacation on my other YouTube channel, GJT After Dark, and the class that I taught at Frolicon, as well as some things that I enjoyed there. So please do go to the link tree in the comments below and check out that channel. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to Good Journeys Tarot. And when you see me post about the upcoming live, go ahead and go to YouTube and click that notification for that specific video. I will post them on Sunday afternoons, right after I draw the card here, as I do each week. So I did have a few new decks that came into my life. We're not going to really talk much about them because they're going to be taken care of in other ways. But one was I did purchase the Giant Rider-Waite Tarot to use in my class, Sex Positive Tarot, that I taught last week. And it did come in handy. The other deck that I purchased, I had not intended to purchase. However, the Sex Positive Tarot deck, which is being published in Italy, has not arrived. It's been in the mail for over a month now, and they assure me it's on the way, but there's no tracking. So I went ahead and bought the Erotic Tarot, which some of you have seen now, by Lawrence King Publishing, to have for that class and to talk about one of the things they wanted to talk about in the class. So I will be doing a full walkthrough of this over on GJT After Dark. So if you're interested in those more adult themes in tarot, please do like and subscribe to that channel as well, so you don't miss out as I move into those videos. I will be doing a series of videos that cover the content of my class that I taught at Frolicon on that channel in the next few weeks. So if you want to be alerted to those, go ahead and like and subscribe to that channel. And again, it is available via the link tree in the description box below. So this week, in addition to getting back from vacation, I have had kind of a weird transitional period, which we'll talk about more when we get to our card of the day, which is the Death card. But for now, just to let you know that I've been working on some things in my brain. And one of those is that I had been thinking for a long time about the card back for the deck. And this was the very first card back that I created back when I thought this was just going to be me mocking up the cards for myself. But then people became interested in the project. And so I've tried to improve my skills and make the cards more precisely what I want than I was before. And so I began to play with this image, and I had added the parchment, which everyone has seen on my website and my various social medias. And then I wanted to incorporate sunflowers, but this bothered me because I felt like the sunflowers took away from the main focal point, that spiritual esoteric symbol of the key that I wanted. I did go back to a reversible image. It still didn't work for me. I tried moving the sunflowers around. I even added roses at one point. Then this week, I was creating a new image for my phone, like I do periodically. And I had this idea of doing the sunflower as a watermark, which you can't really see really clearly here. And I thought that would be great for our card back. And so here's what I ended up with. It will be reversible, and it has the sunflower, but the sunflower doesn't take away from the other image that I really wanted to stand out. And so I really liked this. This has really gotten me to thinking about things that I might do for people who support the deck. And one of those is that I am having a custom wooden box designed, and a friend of mine who owns an Etsy shop will be creating it. And I'm going to be getting two, one for myself and one to give away when the deck comes out. And so this is a mock-up of what that might look like. The sunflower will be probably stained, and then the key will be actually engraved and painted on to the top of the box. I was actually talking to her about creating tarot boxes this past weekend, as she's one of the artists in my art show, and did some gorgeous, gorgeous boxes. And I thought that this would be a really great way to incorporate some of my friends who are creative out there. And so we will, as we get closer to time of the deck being put out there, have this available as a prize for one lucky person. And Tarot Stash is in the house. Laura is here, and if anyone else is here, do say hi so I can say hello. Glad to have you here. And it really got me to thinking about what kinds of things people like to see when they get a deck as rewards from authors and creators. And other possibilities for the box would be something like this if she decides the key is too small and intricate. Or worst case scenario, the box would just have the rose cross design on it. But I had been thinking about what kinds of things I might give away to people as appreciation for their involvement and for supporting me in the process. And one of the things that I did was create a die cut sticker. And I realize this image isn't very clear, and that's because it's really small in my email, and I had to make it bigger, but I wanted you to see how it looked as a die cut. But please do tell me in the comments or here today while we're together, what kinds of things you think you would like to see as a reward or a trinket or a little thank you when the decks come out. I will probably have these stickers printed in the next couple of months to use for other things as well. And am looking forward to them. It's nice to see your artwork in like print, right? Okay. So let's talk a bit about transformation and transitions. So even before I drew the death card 2 weeks ago on Sunday, I had been thinking about this idea of transformation, beginning with that Tuesday when I had an experience in meditation. This was working with the Cube of Space study, and then the death card came up, and then the next week, I had several readings which spoke about transformation. The Two of Pentacles came up a lot that week. And then I drew a card when I got back from my vacation from this deck, the Super Attractor. And here's what it says. When I'm connected to spirit, I feel a sense of creativity, magnitude, and ease that I've never known before. And that is really the transformation that I've been going through since 3 weeks ago now, when I had that experience with the Cube of Space. And it's just a change of mental focus of, instead of focusing on what is wrong, focusing on what is right. And even yesterday, as I drew my weekly rune as part of my weekly practice, I got Berkana being that card of birth. So perhaps we are at the point where, we've changed things enough, or we have recognized the things that are wrong that need to be removed, that now we can see the new thing. So that's really where I've been headed, and this all relates really to the death card, because the death card is all about transformation. It's about wiping away that which is no longer useful, so that we can reach that point of a new day. And that's something that we see in the Smith-Waite image. The Smith-Waite image is very different than the traditional Marseille image, which is the skeleton with the sickle. While Pixie and Waite did incorporate things like the crown and the scepter, the things that denoted people in power facing death, um, he also included the sun in the background. I think that's probably the biggest difference. Even though the Golden Dawn meaning of the card is very much the same from this deck to, say, like the Marseille, um, that addition of the sun really brings out that idea of the beginning. So for me, the death card is not just about the ending, which we typically see depicted in most decks of antiquity, but it's also about that beginning. Without that beginning, it's not actually complete. It's not fulfilled. It's not what it is meant to be. So let's look at some cards. I love the Lost Hollow. It actually has a lot of the same imagery as the Smith-Waite. It's just lovely. This is a version of the Thoth, which takes, its lead from the Marseille, where we have our skeleton with the sickle. But you'll see that she has added this aspect of a path to a new place, right? So she's attempted to add in that piece that was missing from the Harris Crawley image. And there are some lovely decks like this one that includes some of the symbols from both traditional decks as well as the Smith-Waite imagery that are just gorgeous. Interesting depiction of life and death there in the Good Karma Tarot. I don't know why, but I kind of just love the skeleton in his fancy little outfit. Flowers growing around him. It's really pretty. From the Slow Tarot. Some decks keep it simple. This is the Spacious Tarot, the Prism of Visions, which I don't tend to pull out a lot because I have a hard time looking at these cards because of the artwork and the way that they're done. Probably one of my favorite reimaginings of the card is this Kiss of Death by the Fyodor Pavlov, in which she is embracing death. And that is one of the things that we see in the Smith-Waite image that we don't see in all decks, particularly decks of antiquity, and that is how different people respond to death. There are those who embrace it, those who accept it, and then those who fight it, and yet it still overcomes them. Here in the Javel Noir, we simply have the oh my goodness, the word is on the tip of my tongue, but it's basically, going down the river Styx. I can't remember what you call a person who pushes the boat on the river Styx. Okay, my poor brain. And then we have some that really just focus on that death aspect. Here we have the Wild Wood. I kind of love the inclusion of the ravens or vultures with the skull, which is being picked over. The Bonestone and Earth Flesh includes that kind of sunrise, sunset in the background. And you'll see there underneath the person, there's kind of like branches growing into the ground. So even though there is death, there is also life that is coming about. And then, of course, the skull depicted there in the various little things in the sky. So the next several cards are completely different in the way that they approach death. One is, of course, the Light Seers, which is called Death and Rebirth, which is, I think, a beautiful depiction. You don't see the grim part of death as much as you might in some decks. There's definitely the hooded kind of thing going on there that you see with the Reaper. Welcome, Amy from Strength Reverse. So glad you're with us this morning. Different and then this is the Mystic Garbage Tarot. If you live in the South and maybe other parts of the country, this is a picture that you see all the time. Possums on the side of the road where they've been hit by a car. For some reason, moths tend to be associated with death. And I meant to do more research on why that is. I haven't found in any of my books where it really talks about moths and death. So if anybody has any thoughts about that, do let me know. Oh my gosh, Amy, I'm going to buy it. Okay. I'm going to order it right after this. Okay. The Santa Morte, it keeps coming up. It's a beautiful deck. I love it. I just don't know if I'll use it every day, right? To me, a deck full of skeletons, I kind of feel like I want to use only in October, maybe into December. Yeah, I'm going to buy it. We will do a live and we will talk about that deck later this summer after we get through the Robin Wood. All right, let's do it. There we go. And Tara Stasha, if you want in on that conversation, let me know. Anyone, in fact. So this card is from my friend and mentor, Laura Perry's deck, the Minoan Tarot by Red Feather, a division of Schiffer. And this is a depiction of a Minoan crypt or grave site. And I think it's lovely. This is the death card from my very first deck. Does anybody remember what my very first deck was? Anybody? Are you paying that close attention to me? I didn't work with it for very long. It is the Golden Tarot, and in it, there is a woman who is mourning. She's holding a flower, and the sun is rising in the background. And this was somewhat the inspiration for my card. I wanted a red sky. And you even see this in some other decks where there is like a red sky with trees in the front. And this card to me kind of denotes an aspect of the shadow side of this card, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so, yeah, everybody's going, do you promise to buy the deck? Do you promise to buy the deck? Okay. Here we go. It's already on my shopping list, so all I have to do is hit buy. Let's see. In fact, it's on my wish list, which is on my link tree. So at any time, someone could have grabbed it for me, but I will grab it for myself right now. Let's see. Santa Morte. There you are. Add to cart. Added to cart. Shopping with Rosemary, a new type of video, right? All right. Boop. Boop. Okay, it will be here Tuesday. All right, Santa Morte. All right, all done. I guess this was an appropriate time to buy it, right? As we were talking about death and there's skeletons in all of our death cards. Just a natural foregone conclusion, I guess, that we would do that. Okay, so the Golden Dawn calls the death card the Lord of the Gate of Death. Okay, why couldn't you come up with a name that didn't have death in it? I mean, that's the name of the card. I don't get it. But historically, this card has been called the unnumbered card, i.e. they didn't put a name or the unnamed card. They didn't put a number or a name on the card because 13 being bad luck, so to speak. Some people associate that with the Friday the 13th death of the Knights Templar, who are often associated with some of the other cards in the tarot deck. Others have associated it with other things throughout history. The reason that 13 is an unlucky number. And so they don't want to put it on the card, and they'll leave the name off because, they don't want to talk about death. Okay, well, I mean, that totally makes sense. I mean, I do see the transformation aspect because butterflies also are in some death cards because of their transformation line. But I like the darkness to light aspect. Moths are drawn to the light, so they leave the dark and go to light. Perfect. Thank you, Amy. I'm going to add that to my little guidebook now about moths. So that's exactly what I've been trying to wrap my head around, and I'm sure if I thought about it long enough, I would have come up with it, but I didn't. Amy did. Thank you very much. So this card is one of those that is associated with some very negative things, such as closure, conclusions, endings, decay, mortality, that type of thing. But also it's associated with the positive things like beginnings, about change, evolution, growth, liberation and freedom. And so for me, as I'm studying this card, the realization for me is that it's not one or the other, it's both. And in 78 Degrees of Wisdom, Rachel Pollack talks about how many people see this card as a card that shows, okay, it's time for transformation, but that's not the case. This is the card showing you're going through a transformation right now. It's not about needing to transform. It's about the transformation is happening as we're sitting here and we're reading the cards. Right, absolutely, Tara Stash. That's why I have these live conversations. And I love it when people come on and chat with me in person, but it's great to have people talking in the conversation as well. Although I haven't quite figured out how to go back and see the live chat to get the little things that I want out of it. And that's just a Rosemary not being technologically savvy at moments thing. So this is not a sudden change, but it's really part of a cycle. And let's talk about that for a minute. And I'm going to use this image. This is the current version of the wheel for my deck. We haven't actually talked about the wheel, but I needed it for my planner. And I originally had created it last October and recently redid it in colors that I thought would more go with my deck. But we start with the wheel and that kind of karmic cycle, right? Things moving forward, or possibly on the shadow side, moving in reverse. You're going backwards rather than forwards, not with the flow of things. And we move to justice, right? And justice is where we determine, okay, are we right or are we wrong? Or are we really being fair here? And what's going on? And then in the Hanged Man is kind of that point where we are either being punished or we are achieving enlightenment because of what we learned when we looked at the scales of our life, right? And so even if we're being punished as a martyr, so to speak, as someone who is in the right but not the majority, we gain enlightenment. That's something we learned a few weeks ago. And that enlightenment then means that we have to kill certain things in our life. We have to do away with it. Hence, death coming along and just wiping out things in its path on the card. And this is the card where we are now doing that. We are destroying certain things, or certain things are being destroyed so that we can reach a new day. Okay, we can be transformed as a result of that enlightenment we achieved in the Hanged Man. Thank you, Tarot Stash. So this card is really the halfway point. We have 22 major arcana cards, and so this is kind of the middle. This isn't the end. You're not achieving the great work that the 22 cards lead to. You're halfway there. So you're still going to face some trials along the way. You're going to face them again in 3 cards, in card 16, and then you will face them again in card 20 before you ever get to your success and your fulfillment in card 21, the world. But you'll see that as we go through the major arcana, that cycle of going through change and then reaching an enlightenment gets shorter as we go along because we're learning, right? It took us 13 cards to get to this point where things are being destroyed, and we're achieving a new way of thinking and transforming our lives. And then it takes 3 or 4 cards for us to get there again in our life, and then it only takes a couple of cards when we get to the end. And so as we go through the major arcana and that journey of the Fool and within our life, it gets easier to transform for us because we have gone through it before. First in death, and then we'll go through it again in the Tower, and then again in Judgment, with shorter and shorter cycles in that transformation. So let's talk a little bit about the people. There are some sections that I wanted to read from some books, and let me see if I think it's in this one. Oh dear. 78 Degrees of Wisdom is the book that I wanted. I actually literally put little yellow stars beside the things I wanted to show you, and it's not there. But there is a description in this book, The Secrets of the Waite Smith Tarot, about the people and how they each respond in the Smith-Waite imagery to the events. So first of all, there's the king. So we can see that death affects everyone, change affects everyone. And but he was resistant to death, and death just plowed all the way over him, right? And then we have the child. The child, it like just embraces death, the offering death flowers, greeting death as a friend, out of innocence, possibly. And then we have the bishop, that religious figure who feels like this is the moment of their reward, so to speak. That they have the answers for death, and so they might negotiate with death, perhaps. And then there's the maiden, the young woman, and she doesn't embrace it like, say, the child offering it a gift as a friend, but she accepts it. And that's one of the things about this card when we talk about the shadow side, is that oftentimes this card represents a failure to accept bereavement, or to be struggling with bereavement and not being able to move beyond it when it happens in our lives. This card rarely actually means physical death. And Teresa Reed makes a great point in her book, My Poor Brain. Let me think the name of it because I don't have it with me. I think it's No Questions Asked. It's the blue one, the green blue one. She talks about how death actually has never meant physical death, but death does come up in reading. So like she talked about how she and her daughter were flying to graduation, and her daughter was anxious, and so they did a card reading, and the sun came up and the 10 of Pentacles and another card, and they were all very positive. And her question had been, okay, when will I be able to become financially independent in the next 6 months? Because she was having some issues with her father, who was the one who had been supporting her all along, and she didn't want to rely on him anymore. Well, and she was like, yeah, absolutely. It looks like that's going to happen. And of course, 6 months later, they look back and her father passed away, and she received substantial inheritance, which allowed her to be financially independent. So while death can show up in hindsight from readings, it can be what actually results in you achieving what it is you were looking for. It's not necessarily something that's going to pop out. And so death is not something that a lot of tarot readers read about, like health or legal issues, for various reasons. Let's talk about some of the symbols in here. So the flag, which we see in a lot of different cards, the Robin Wood has a flag, and some others. That flower was a representation of the esoteric school that the card came from, of the Golden Dawn. And as a result, that Mystic Rose has continued to show up in deck after deck. And so when I did my card, I included the Mystic Rose, which is a part of my Rosy Cross design, that I had shared. Yeah, yeah, look at that. Good stuff. Good stuff. Another symbol, of course, being the sunrise, that idea of a new day, of we are being transformed and things will not be the same as they were before. This is not the end. This is also the beginning. We have the horse, which represents movement. This is not a passive card. This is an active card. There is a movement here. We are going from ending to beginning. It's not just the ending, but the ending, but the beginning. And I think that the river also can represent movement, because rivers flow through the land. This card being associated with water and emotions, as a result. And so that's why there is a river in here. And actually, there is a boat on the river, that kind of idea of people moving on, depicted in the card. One thing that historically this card has denoted has been a transition of power. So, like the end of one regime and the beginning of another, i.e., the king is dead. Long live the new king, right? So to speak. And, the card denotes that everybody's equal before death. Some of the other ideas on the shadow side that I wanted to mention were that sometimes the card can reflect laziness, or stagnation, i.e., we've gotten to the ending, but we aren't willing to accept the beginning, right? And that's related to that idea that we're stuck in our bereavement phase after a death in our life. We're not moving on, and without that beginning, the card is not fulfilled. It's not complete, so to speak. So, are you ready to look at a card design? Is anybody still listening? All right, let's do it. Let's look at some card designs. There we go. All right, so this was the first card that I created, and because I decided that it had to have the sun. The sun in the background was the most important thing to me. It had to have some semblance of death in it, and so that's why I chose to do like a barren, rocky land with the skull on it. And I wanted that Mystic Rose for the connection to the rest of the deck. Obviously, the river for that movement that we see with the horse in the Waite Smith, as well as that connection to the water aspect. But because of their relationship to transformation, and I love butterflies, and they are in other cards in the major arcana. Initially, I thought that might be the Fool going through each of the 22 cards, but I've not figured out how to incorporate the butterfly in all of the 22 cards. An idea that I got from the Lost Hollow, which incorporates a raven as the Fool going through the Fool's journey. And I played around with it a lot, because I'm like, how do I connect this with the other cards in my deck, other than some of this imagery is repeated? And so I decided to look at maybe making the skull a shadow. Like the skull is a silhouette. It is a person that was in another card, right, that had died, and so this is just their skull, right? And And then I was like, well, maybe it should be red. I really feel like red belongs in the death card. And I was like, yeah, no, that doesn't work. I went back and I tried to make it a more bone color using a different skull. And it was like, yeah, I don't like it without being able to see the teeth and whatnot. And so I added the teeth back. And so I thought this was going to be the final version. And so I asked in the Facebook, and I even did one with a more realistic skull, but it was too realistic for the rest of the image. And so I asked in Good Journeys into Tarot what people thought. And Ange was like, I like this one. Of course, she picked the very first one that I did. So I spent a lot of time playing with different variations, and the first one was the one. That happened with me a couple of weeks ago as well. I did various variations of the card, trying to make it exactly what I wanted, and everybody liked the first version. So sometimes you get it right off the bat, right? So, is there anything that you would like to see in a death card that you don't see here? I mean, I kind of feel like maybe I should have some trees in this grassy land, but I haven't had the chance to go in and add any. Just maybe silhouettes of the trees along the horizon, or a tree over here on the side where the river meets the card edge. I don't know. What are your thoughts about adding something to it? While you're thinking about that, I wanted to just read this paragraph from the Understanding the Aleister Crowley's Thoughts Tarot by Marie-Laure Duquette about the letter none and the fish, which I mentioned briefly earlier. It is depicted in the Rosetta Tarot, which I used this morning. Thank you for popping in, Gerald, and seeing that reading. If you haven't seen it, it's on Instagram. But it says in Hamlet, Marcellus tells Horatio something is rotten in the state of Denmark. He might just as easily have said something smells fishy. Both statements are uncannily appropriate when the subject is the death card. The Hebrew letter assigned to death is none, which I previously mentioned, and that means fish. The fish is one of the most revered symbols of tenacious life and resurrection in the traditions of Western civilization. Dead fish decay quickly and smell terrible in Denmark and everywhere else. But the secret of life is that stinky stuff. So, we sometimes have to deal with death in life. And this card is all about learning to deal with death and move forward and change from it. So Tarot Stash doesn't really care, doesn't think the trees will be helpful. Is there anything that you long to see in a death card that you don't see, perhaps? Oh, wrong stack. All right, let's shuffle up the rest of the deck that is left, and let's see what card we're going to be doing next week. And hopefully I will find someone who would like to join me in chatting about it and its meaning and symbols. And all right, so differences of opinion are always great. We'll see. I might play with adding a little something that possibly doesn't distract. I'll shuffle one more time and draw a card. So it's been interesting. I've said before, when I draw a card, it's eerie how it relates to my life at the moment. And the death card certainly has been relevant the last few weeks, and it looks like it's still going to be relevant this week because it was in our week ahead spread that I did this morning on Instagram. Let's see what our card for next week will be that we'll be creating. Okay, it's going to be the Two of Swords. our card of choices, as Benabel calls them, the Blind Seer. Um, and I really like what she says about this card. This card came up in my personal reading today with the Spirit Keepers Tarot, and she talks about in her little white book about how it's not always the first choice or the second choice. It's probably a third choice that you haven't yet seen. And for me, that kind of becomes about that middle path. Like maybe it's not the most active or the most passive, but somewhere in the middle, which relates to the article that I wrote for the Cartomancer and will be out in a few weeks. So be sure to check that out. So yes, so the Two of Swords will be our card next week. If you'd like to join me on the live, do let me know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And on Sunday afternoon or Monday, go over to YouTube and just click the reminder for the next video. Also, if you have any ideas for things that you would like to see as far as swag that I showed at the beginning of the broadcast, do share those with me. I would love some ideas. I am considering several options, but I don't want to create anything that people wouldn't like or wouldn't want. You know, I don't want to be stuck with stuff. I want to be able to give it all away, right? So until next time, everybody, good journeys, and thank you for being here.